Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Lucas was sitting on the living room couch with his hands clasped, elbows resting on his knees. His eyes were fixed on the floor, occasionally lifting just to watch Vivian pace back and forth, restless, twisting her wedding ring around her finger like it weighed more than it should. The scene was silent, but everything inside him was screaming. The woman who, just a few years ago, he called his safe haven now felt like a stranger sharing the same roof. And even in the silence, the weight of everything left unsaid filled the house, making the air heavy, suffocating. They'd been married for 5 years, but their story went back 7. 7 years that, for Lucas, were the foundation of everything he believed about love, companionship, and life's purpose. When he met her at a simple party, with no big expectations, the world seemed to stop for a moment. Vivian was leaning near the grill, laughing loudly with a group of friends, holding a soda can. She wasn't trying to get attention, but she did. She had this light, easygoing way about her, like she carried a kind of freedom other people only pretended to have. She was the kind of person who could own the room without even trying, and that natural glow was what captivated Lucas from the very first glance. Their conversation flowed as if they were old friends. They talked about everything: music, careers, dreams, and even fears. Vivian, with her sharp humor and disarming honesty, charmed Lucas. Until then, he'd never really believed in love at first sight, but within a few weeks, he was completely taken by her. Every day with Vivian felt like discovering a new layer of the world. She made him laugh, think, question, plan. In no time, they were inseparable. They moved in together before their first year of dating was even up. To a lot of people, it seemed rushed. To them, it felt inevitable. In the beginning, everything fit together perfectly. They shared the same bed, the same plans, even the passwords to their streaming services. They watched shows under the same blanket, cooked together on Sundays, and dreamed about a future where they'd watch their own kids run around the yard, hand in hand. Vivian talked about starting a small business that combined her passion for design and cooking. Lucas, on the other hand, wanted to climb the ladder at his company so he could provide stability for them both. They admired and supported each other like a team that knew what it wanted in life. At least, that's what Lucas thought. The marriage proposal came out of nowhere. It wasn't in Paris or on some sunset beach. It happened on a Saturday morning at home, while they were sharing pancakes and laughing at a silly video on the internet. Lucas pulled out a little box from his hoodie pocket and, his voice trembling, said, "I want to laugh like this with you every day for the rest of my life." Vivian cried, laughed, and said yes. And he really believed that was the start of forever. The next few months were all about the excitement of wedding planning, choosing the venue, guest list, customized invitations. Vivian dove right into it, and Lucas felt that this was the confirmation they'd made the right decision. But it was then, during that supposed time of celebration, that the cracks began to show, small enough that Lucas didn't really worry, but big enough to leave invisible marks. Vivian, who used to spend hours researching decor ideas, suddenly lost interest. She stopped sending references, ignored the wedding planner's messages, and kept putting off decisions with vague excuses. "It's just too much work," she'd say. "I don't want to think about it right now." Lucas believed her. He didn't want to pressure her, let alone doubt what they felt for each other. He preferred to rationalize it. He thought that the stress of adult life was draining both of them and that this was normal. But deep down, it wasn't. Instead of talking about what was going on, Lucas stayed quiet, hoping things would go back to the way they were. And Vivian, for her part, seemed more and more distant, like someone watching life through a shop window without wanting to really touch it. Late-night talks turned into random words between yawns. The laughter lessened. Sex became rare, mechanical, almost like an obligation. And even then, Lucas kept believing it was just a phase, that every couple goes through this. He remembered the advice he heard growing up, those clichés about love not being constant but a daily choice. So he chose every single day. He chose to love Vivian even when she didn't seem to return it. He chose to fight for what they had built. He chose to believe that the best was yet to come. But the truth was, without realizing it, Lucas was trying to keep alive something that was already dying. And he was doing it alone. He started noticing that she spent more time on her phone, but he didn't pay much attention. After all, who doesn't do that these days? Sometimes she'd smile at the screen and quickly turn away so he wouldn't see. Other times, she'd head out to take care of something quick and come back hours later with excuses that didn't add up. But Lucas, clinging to denial, preferred to think it was just their hectic life, not a deliberate choice to pull away. Because accepting the latter would mean admitting the marriage was hanging by a thread. And he wasn't ready for that. What hurt Lucas the most wasn't the possibility he was being cheated on, but the fact that, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't reach her anymore. Vivian had become a shadow of who she used to be, and he kept wondering if he'd done something wrong. If he'd failed as a husband. If maybe he wasn't interesting, present, or needed enough. That kind of doubt gnaws at you from the inside, little by little, until everything you are starts to crumble. He could still remember when Vivian smiled at him with her eyes, when she'd say she felt safe in his arms. Now, all that was left were long silences and empty looks. Even so, Lucas kept sitting on that couch, trying to figure out how that once vibrant love had turned into nothing but a colorless habit. And in that moment, looking at the woman who seemed unsure if she even wanted to keep being his wife, Lucas felt certain something was seriously wrong. He just didn't know how bad it really was. It was on a seemingly ordinary night, during a get-together with old friends, that Lucas's world started to fall apart, and he had no idea he'd leave that night with a wound that would never fully heal. Jeremy's place, one of the couple's oldest friends, was packed with loud voices, bursts of laughter, and glasses raised in toasts to everything and nothing at the same time. It was the kind of gathering Lucas had always enjoyed, simple, no pretense, just a bunch of people he cared about, talking about life like time was endless. Vivian looked beautiful that night. She wore a simple black dress, her hair down, and she seemed lighter than she had in a while. Lucas even let himself think that maybe she was starting to go back to who she used to be. He wanted to believe it. After dinner, someone suggested a question-and-answer game, the same silly thing they'd been doing since college. Each person pulled a slip of paper from a bowl and read the question out loud, then answered honestly. People laughed at embarrassing questions, old stories, strange confessions. The mood was easygoing. Nobody expected a single sentence to change the course of everything. When it was Vivian's turn, she drew a piece of paper, read it silently, and gave a little smile. The question was, if you could relive a past relationship, which would it be and why? For a second, she froze. Her eyes landed on Lucas's, but she looked away when she saw him. Then, laughing nervously like she didn't want to give anything away, she said, "I guess it would be Darren, my ex from college." That sentence hit the room like a bomb. The light laughter from a few people vanished in seconds. An awkward silence spread, like everyone was waiting for her to say she was kidding. But she didn't. Lucas froze. He felt his heart stop for a moment. Darren. The name echoed from a distance, but with a bitter taste. He knew who Darren was, of course. Vivian had mentioned him a few times over the years, always with a bit of scorn or as an example of what she didn't want to go through again. He cheated on me. Made a fool of me. I never want someone like that near me, she'd said. And now, right in front of their friends, she was admitting she'd relive that relationship? That one? Really? She realized the vibe had changed, probably faster than she expected. She tried a nervous laugh, then said, "Guys, calm down, it's just a game, don't take it so seriously, it was just a silly memory, it means nothing." But the words had already been spoken. And once spoken, words don't go away. Lucas kept looking at her. But this time, not with a look of someone trying to understand. It was the look of someone who just found out he'd been sleeping next to someone who kept looking back at the past. On the drive home, the car felt smaller than ever. Vivian tried to break the ice by commenting on something Jeremy said at dinner, like she could rewind the night to a point before everything went wrong. But Lucas didn't respond. He kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel. The silence between them was different this time. Heavy. Dense. Vivian noticed, obviously. But she didn't say anything. Maybe she thought it was better to let it blow over. Maybe she thought he'd forget in time. But he didn't. Once at home, Lucas locked the door, hung the keys, and turned to her. The silence finally broke. "Why'd you say that?" Vivian stopped taking off her earrings. She froze for a second, like she was choosing her words carefully before letting them out. "Baby, it was just a joke. You know how these games are, people say random stuff, but you didn't say something random," he cut her off, speaking quietly but firmly. "You said Darren. Him, of all people. You know how much that hurts?" Vivian huffed, annoyed. She crossed her arms and said, "I was just being honest. It doesn't mean I still feel anything for him. It was just a memory, a name that popped into my head in the moment. You're blowing this out of proportion, like always." Lucas laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, almost a sigh of someone finally seeing what he'd been avoiding for so long. "Blowing it out of proportion, like always," she said. But he wasn't. He was finally seeing the woman she really was. And in that living room, under the harsh light of the lamp, he saw a person who didn't think twice before hurting the one she claimed to love. In the days that followed, Lucas tried to stay calm, but her comment kept echoing in his mind. He tried burying himself in work, in household chores, but as soon as there was a quiet moment, that image came back, Vivian, laughing, admitting she'd relive a relationship with someone who cheated on her, someone who made her suffer. And he couldn't stop asking himself why. Why was she still thinking about him? Why wasn't that memory buried like he'd thought it was? And most of all, why didn't she think about him, Lucas, when asked about a love she'd want to relive? He started paying attention to the details. To the times she smiled at her phone and quickly hid it. To the times she said she was going out to see a friend but came home smelling like men's cologne. To the ever-weakening excuses. It was like that silly game had opened a door she'd tried to keep shut, and now it was flung wide open. Lucas wasn't sleeping well anymore. He'd lie in bed next to her, but feel like he was alone. The thoughts took over, night after night. That was the point in the story where love started getting replaced by something even stronger than pain, the certainty that there was more to all this. Something he didn't know yet, but he was about to find out. Lucas was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that was getting cold between his fingers. The clock on the wall said it was almost 2 in the morning, but he didn't even feel time passing. The apartment was silent, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was an emptiness packed with questions echoing inside him like a ticking time bomb. He couldn't stop replaying that night at Jeremy's place. Since then, he'd been noticing every little sign he used to miss. Tiny changes in Vivian's behavior, excuses that piled up like bricks, building an invisible wall between them. And now, more than ever, he needed answers. Vivian still hadn't come home. What used to be rare was turning into a habit. First it was quick outings that lasted way longer than expected. Then it was plans that came out of nowhere. Now she didn't even bother explaining. "I'm going out with the girls," she'd say. But Lucas didn't buy it anymore. Something was wrong, and he knew ignoring it would only make the pain last longer. He looked at his phone on the table, hesitated a moment, then picked it up. No messages from her, no missed calls. He knew he shouldn't, but his fingers moved almost by themselves, opening his chat with Vivian. The last message was from him. "What time are you coming back?" It was sent at 10:17 p.m. No reply. Her absence weighed more than any shouting match could. It was the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. He set the phone down, rubbed his face with his hands, and let out a long sigh. He needed to confront her. He needed to hear from her own mouth what he was starting to fear. Yet part of him still wanted to cling to any explanation that might rationalize it all. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe he really was blowing things out of proportion. Maybe. The sound of her key in the door broke his train of thought. He looked up and saw Vivian walking in. It was already past 2:30 in the morning. She hesitated when she saw him, like she hadn't expected him to still be awake. "What are you doing up?" Her voice was casual, but there was a note of something else, maybe guilt. "Waiting for you," Lucas said, without looking away. She frowned, dropped her purse on the counter, and walked to the fridge for a water bottle. She avoided his eyes. He knew that tactic well. "Lucas. I told you, I was with the girls. You know how we lose track of time when we're having fun. You didn't answer my text." "I didn't see it," she said way too quickly. Lucas let out a low, humorless laugh. She didn't see it? That was a lie. Vivian was always glued to her phone. If he texted her during work hours, she'd reply within minutes. But now, conveniently, she didn't see it. He crossed his arms, leaning back in his chair. "Then tell me, where were you really?" This time, she looked at him. But it wasn't a look of shock or outrage. It was a calculating look, like she was picking her words carefully. "I've already told you, Lucas. I was with the girls." He shook his head slowly. "And if I call them right now? Would they back you up?" Her silence was his answer. She glanced away, pressing her lips together, and for a moment he saw a flicker of hesitation. It was all he needed to confirm what he already suspected. Still, he needed to hear it. "Do you want me to be honest?" Vivian finally said, exhaling long and hard. Lucas felt a shiver run up his spine. He wasn't sure he did. But there was no turning back. "Yeah. I do." She took a deep breath, looked at the table, then at him, and said, "I need some space." For a moment, Lucas thought he misheard. "What?" I think I need a little time, Lucas. To figure out what I really want." It felt like the ground disappeared beneath his feet. He felt a cold ache in his stomach, like someone had punched him. "Time for what, Vivian?" She stayed quiet. Her eyes were far away, like she was somewhere else, with someone else. That's when he understood. "You need time so you can see Darren." He practically tasted the bitterness as he said the name. He saw her body tense up, her eyes blinking faster. She took her time to answer. "It's not exactly that, but it was." Of course it was. Lucas felt anger rising in his chest, but at the same time, a strange calm settled over him. It was like his heart finally understood what his mind had been refusing to accept. She wasn't really there anymore. Maybe she'd been gone for a long time. "You want me to wait around while you figure out if I'm good enough?" he asked, his voice firm, but thick with a pain he couldn't hide. Vivian opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because she knew, deep down, that was exactly what she was asking. She wanted the security of marriage while chasing some ghost from her past. And worse, she expected Lucas to be okay with it. He stood up slowly. His body felt heavy, like every cell refused to process what was happening. He looked at her one last time, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel love. He felt pity. "You've already made your decision, Vivian." With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind not just that conversation, but everything he'd once believed they had together. Lucas headed down the hallway toward the bedroom, dragging the weight of that last conversation with Vivian behind every step. Her words still rang in his head, over and over, like a broken record. I need some space. As if love was something you could pause, as if he were just an option on the shelf while she decided whether she still wanted him. He closed the bedroom door behind him and leaned against it, letting out a heavy sigh. His heart was pounding, but a strange clarity was settling in his mind. There was no more doubt. No more room for denial. Vivian had already made her choice, even if she hadn't spelled it out. Her silence was louder than any explanation could be. And now what? What do you do when you realize everything you've built is collapsing right in front of your eyes? He looked around the room. It was the same place where they'd shared so many nights, whispered secrets in the dark, made plans for a future that now felt like a lie. He could still smell her on the pillow, her unfinished book was on the nightstand. Yet somehow it all seemed different. Less real. Like it wasn't the home it used to be. Lucas sat at the edge of the bed and ran his hands over his face. What destroyed him the most wasn't that she might be cheating, or that she wanted to rekindle something with Darren. It was knowing he would have waited if she'd asked. If she'd promised to come back, he would have waited. And that thought disgusted him, because he knew he shouldn't. He knew no one deserved to be put in that position. He heard Vivian's footsteps in the hallway. She hesitated for a moment, then gave a soft knock on the door, like she was scared of her own decision. "Lucas, can we talk?" He didn't answer right away. He kept staring into space, thoughts swirling with all the things he might say. In the end, he just sighed and said, "Come in." She opened the door slowly, like she was stepping into unknown territory. Her face was different now. Gone was the confidence from minutes before. She looked tired, confused, maybe even regretful. But Lucas didn't know if he could believe any of her expressions anymore. Vivian stopped near the foot of the bed, crossing her arms, looking down, then at him. "I never wanted to hurt you." Lucas let out a low, humorless laugh. "But you did." She closed her eyes for a second, took a deep breath, like she was trying to collect herself. I need to figure out if this doubt I have is temporary or if it's something bigger." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and stared at her with a look that wasn't pleading or angry anymore. Just bitter resignation. "You're not doubting anything, Vivian. You just want to see if Darren still cares about you." Her eyes went wide, surprised by how direct he was. "That's not, it is," Lucas cut her off, his voice more certain this time. "If it wasn't, you wouldn't be asking for time. You wouldn't be going out late at night, ignoring my messages. You wouldn't be here right now trying to justify the unjustifiable." Silence settled over them, heavy, uncomfortable. Vivian bit her lower lip, and it looked like she was searching for something in his eyes. But Lucas wasn't there anymore. The man who would have done anything to save this marriage was disappearing right in front of her. "I just need to be sure," she whispered, almost to herself. Lucas stood up. "And I need my self-respect." She looked up at him, startled by that answer. But he was done. He walked to the closet, opened it, and started taking out clothes. He pulled out a suitcase, laid it on the bed, and began folding items methodically. There was no rush or anger in his movements. He was calm. Incredibly calm. Which was the scariest part. Vivian took a step closer, confused. "What are you doing?" He didn't look at her as he answered, "Giving you the time you want." She blinked, baffled. "Lucas, wait. You don't have to leave. We can talk about this." He paused for a second, looked at her, and realized for the first time that she genuinely hadn't expected this reaction. She thought he'd wait. That he'd stay there, patiently, while she decided whether she wanted him or not. He zipped the suitcase slowly. "I've always been here, Vivian. I've always chosen you. But for once, I'm choosing me." She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Because deep down, she knew there were no words left to fix this. Lucas grabbed the suitcase, took a deep breath, and walked past her, out of the bedroom, out of the apartment, out of the life they once shared. A cold gust of wind hit Lucas's face the moment he stepped outside. The suitcase felt heavy in his hand, but not as heavy as the weight that was finally starting to lift from his shoulders. He wasn't sure where he was going, only that he couldn't stay there anymore. There was nothing left for him in that apartment, in that marriage, in that story he'd fought so hard to keep alive. He got in his car and sat there for a moment, fingers gripping the steering wheel, his mind struggling to process everything that had happened so quickly. That was it. It was over. And yet there were no shouts, no desperate tears, no apologies. Vivian didn't try to stop him, didn't chase after him, didn't beg him to stay. Maybe, deep down, she wanted it to end like this. Maybe she knew this was always how it would turn out. He started the car and drove aimlessly for a while. The empty streets mirrored how he felt inside, silent, like someone had hit pause on everything he'd once believed was certain. He pulled into a random hotel parking lot and went inside without thinking much. He rented a room, went upstairs, dropped his suitcase on the floor, and lay on the bed staring at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep. How could he? His mind was a whirlwind of memories, voices, and questions that had no answers. In the middle of the night, he grabbed his phone out of habit and opened his conversation with Vivian. Her name was still at the top of his chat list. He could type something, ask if she was okay. But why? What good would it do? His pride wouldn't let him go back. Yet his heart still ached to understand. The next day, he went through his usual routine like nothing had changed. He went to work, stayed busy, got everything done as if his life wasn't falling apart behind the scenes. But he could sense the difference in himself. He felt it in the way coworkers looked at him, in how people asked, "You all right?" and he'd just smile and say, "Yeah, of course." Weeks went by. The divorce process started, and it all happened too fast. No big fights, no pushback. Vivian accepted everything without a word, like she'd been expecting it. Then one day, something happened. Lucas was having coffee in a cafe near the office when he heard a familiar name from the table next to him, Darren. It hit his ears like an electric jolt. He turned slightly and saw two men chatting and laughing. One of them was talking about a coworker who had gotten back with his ex. "She ditched her husband to be with him, can you believe that?" one of them said. Lucas felt his stomach drop. He didn't want to listen, but he couldn't help it. Worst part is, the guy's already seeing someone else. Sounds like he just wanted to prove he could get her back, you know? An ego thing. Lucas went still. His coffee was getting cold, and the sounds around him faded. He didn't have to ask who they were talking about. He knew. Vivian had thrown everything away for Darren. But Darren never really wanted her back. He felt something strange inside. It wasn't happiness or revenge. It was emptiness. A bitter realization that, in the end, Vivian had destroyed everything over something that never really existed. After leaving the cafe, he glanced at his phone. He thought about sending her a message, asking if she was okay. But after a moment, he locked the screen and slipped it back in his pocket. She made her choice. And for the first time, he was at peace with his. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.